Welcome to the Growth Minded Accountant podcast, where our experts will share best practices on running your firm in the digital age. This podcast is brought to you by CountingWorks PRO. Let's get started.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Growth Minded Accountant. My name is Lee Reams. I'm the founder and CEO of CountingWorks and TaxBuzz.com. And today we are talking about discovering your life purpose. I know this is going to be a big one, but I think it's something that can really help people narrow their focus a little bit more and perhaps add a little more vitality into their day-to-day life. So I'm going to welcome our guest, Paul William Davis. He's all the way from Ireland, and he's going to be our guide today to a life of purpose and success. So Paul, please say hello and share some of your background.
Lee, thank you so much for having me on your show. So for our listeners, I originally trained as a management accountant, so I'm qualified management accountant as well. And what I do is I work with people primarily in professional services, and I help them to get more clients, more fees, and more time, and ultimately to build a successful purpose-driven business. I've been working with companies in all different shapes and sizes. I started my career, I suppose, going into companies and turning them around, and I have a 100% success rate. My average turnaround period for a company is 6 months. So I've been there on the side of commerciality when it comes to businesses. But there's been another side to me, which will be an intuitive side. So on one aspect, I've got the logical and the analytical side. But since a very young age, I've been highly intuitive, and I would get insights and knowings and images in relation to clients from a very, very young age. But I've used that, for one better word, I've used it to my advantage over my career and my business. I've been in business over 22 years. And the core of what I've been able to develop is to find what is an individual's unique life purpose from an unconscious perspective. Now, there are a lot of people that talk about life purpose. I pretty much am able to debunk a lot of the myths in relation to life purpose. But from my perspective and the clients that I work with, when we align the purpose of an individual with their actual business itself, their business multiplies significantly in a good way. And everybody wants turnover, everybody wants profits. So when it comes to success, that's typically the marker for a lot of clients, a lot of people. However, especially over the last couple of years, we've seen, in the States, for example, we've seen the Great Resignation. We've seen a lot of people wanting to move employment and move away from the business that they've been in. And what people are seeking out is more fulfillment. And that's what I've been doing literally for the past 20 odd years in working with clients.
All right. And that's interesting. And let's jump into that. There's a couple takeaways, I think. One is the pandemic, and then obviously people's reactions to it. In the tax and accounting space, what it's done really, if you think of the medical industry, was like the front line of the medical crisis. But the reality is the tax and accounting space was the front line for all of the stress from the financial side. I'm losing income. I can't go to work. My business is struggling. I need to find, forms of financing, SBA loans, whatever it is. So there's a lot of, I think, accountants that feel a ton of stress right now. You had mentioned getting more time back. What do you think is the driver behind, why so many people kind of feel lost right now and without that direction? And kind of how do you now, is in your coaching, how do you start getting people to kind of redirect themselves?
Well, over the last couple of years, people have actually had the time to reflect on, because of the lockdowns that we've had, especially here in Ireland. Like we had a significant amount of lockdowns compared to, say, the US and other countries. But that has actually given people the time, or I suppose, in some respects, a mirror to themselves, saying, they've spent a little bit more time at home with their family, their kids. They've had and brought different elements into their life, whether it be by way of more exercise or getting out of nature a little bit more. And that has afforded them the time to actually reflect on their life and say, actually, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going? What am I doing? Am I actually really, really enjoying what I'm doing? And while people are literally going from day to day, a lot of my clients come to me and say, look, Paul, I just feel like I'm on a hamster wheel. I'm on a treadmill and I just keep doing the same thing every single day. And an event typically shows up in a person's life, and some people take notice of it, other people don't. For example, they could be at a funeral of somebody that's been close to them. we've had the pandemic, or it could be an illness that's knocked them over, and ask them to question themselves in relation to what is that they're doing. And that's when they now start to search out, actually, what do I want to be doing with my life? And they want an awful lot more. And, people search for, okay, typically when people are in that space, they search for what they're passionate about, what they enjoy doing. A lot of, especially people in professional services, have heard over the last number of years in relation to finding your why. But all of those, whether it be passions, finding your why, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, all of those are actually misleading. And it doesn't fulfill an individual's unconscious drive for fulfillment.
So and I'm going to elaborate on this a little bit more. And I'm just thinking of a standard small US based accounting practice, let's say a CPA firm. They have 5 partners. What would you say to them? So let's say they feel their passion, for example. The reason they go in is they like helping people. They like seeing people have better financial outcomes. But that might not necessarily, is that their purpose? And how would they then take that philosophy to kind of figure out, okay, I want to make myself better, but then how do I bring that into my business? So I want to see a little more of how that connects.
Yeah, perfect. There's two different sides to that. One is, okay, so over all the years that I've been working with clients, I've identified 10 different genius roles, what I call the genius role. Now, where most people will be in professional services, hence the reason why it's my vast majority of my niche, where most people are in professional services, they will typically be one of those genius roles in terms of the two I see coming up are the guide and the fixer. Now, the fixer just wants to jump in. All they want to do is just, they see a problem, they want to fix it, and, not really wanting to integrate with anybody else. They just want to jump in and fix the problem. The guide, on the other hand, wants to take somebody from A to Z and bring that individual to fulfill an outcome. So where you'll see a lot of accountants and CPAs in their practice, what they're doing is they typically unconsciously will be one of those roles. Now, there's 10 different roles, but most accountants and most CPAs will fall into either being the fixer or the guide. That's what I've witnessed. So they're getting somewhat fulfillment from being their genius role, but they're not consciously aware of what their genius role is. Now, when you get a partner that's running an accounting practice and an accounting firm, what you'll find is that partner is wearing multiple hats. So they're wearing the marketing hat, they're wearing the HR hat, they're wearing kind of the client-facing hat, and so on. So what they're doing is they're not really fully aligned with what their unique genius role is. And then on the other aspect is they perceive they're getting fulfillment from the role that they're fulfilling, but it's not their purpose. Their purpose is very, very different. Now, when you align an individual's purpose and you understand, because what a unique purpose will give you is what specifically is the problem that you were to solve with clients and what is literally going to give you fulfillment. And when you align that within the business, now you align everything else within the business. So whether it be the other partners, whether it be the other staff within the firm, you align everything together to be the ultimate purpose. And now you've got literally a fully aligned business, but it's purpose driven. And that's the difference.
All right. So I'm going to try to understand this myself. So is when you're saying your purpose, is this even identifying kind of like the type of clients you want to work with? And you're saying the role. So right now, an accountant, you're right. They're the IT person, their customer support, they're, actually doing production. Are you saying they should step out and kind of look at their practice differently and perhaps limit their role and hire people to, or use technology to kind of backfill? Kind of explain, where you're going with this.
Okay. So what I typically do is we identify an individual's unique purpose. There's 4 elements that make up a life purpose from my perspective. And everything operates on an unconscious level. So let me go through each one of those 4 elements first of all. First of all, there's your genius drivers. Now, if you think of your genius drivers as being, imagine you've got 3 buckets in front of you, and each bucket represents a genius driver. What you unconsciously seek out to do is to fill each one of those buckets. And that's where, if you go back to the ancient Greek philosophers, that's where fulfillment originally came from. It's filling those voids that are within ourselves. So every single genius driver has an element of fulfillment from it. So, but that's what do your genius drivers give you? That's where you get your zest for life, your joy, your passion for life. It's what literally ultimately gives you fulfillment. Hence the reason why I describe it in that way. So that's your first element. Your next element is your genius quest. Now, if you look up the definition of quest, it's a long and arduous journey to achieve something. So your genius quest is specifically what you are here to do. It's the what that people search for, meaning it's what's your mission in life. Your genius quest is your mission in life. It's what you are here to do. Your next element is your genius role, which I've described. People wear multiple hats, but it's an unconscious role. And every single individual will unconsciously play that role throughout their whole life. But until such times we consciously become aware of it, we ultimately end up playing multiple hats, multiple roles in our life. And the last piece is what I call your genius inspiration. Now, most people look for, okay, find your why, and why do you do what you do? But there's two things wrong with that. One is they're trying to figure out from a conscious thinking perspective to find out why is it that you're doing what they're doing. So first of all, they're working from a conscious thinking perspective. But secondly, they're trying to apply a why based on what they're currently doing. And every single individual, now I don't normally use absolutes, but every single individual that has come to me, their life purpose has been not completely different, but has been different to what they perceived what their life purpose was. So if you're trying to apply a why to what you're currently doing, but what you're currently doing is not supposed to be what you're supposed to be doing in the first place, it's going to be the wrong why. The term I prefer to use is your genius inspiration. Now, if you look up the origin of inspiration, it comes from the Latin word inspirare, which is divine guidance. So your life purpose is made up of those four elements: your genius drivers, your genius quest, your genius role, and your genius inspiration. Now, what you do is you align the business around that. Everything, so go back to your, part of the original question, Lee. Anything that doesn't align with those genius elements is what you delegate or outsource. Now, what you're doing is you're filling your day, your week, your month, your year in what is in line with your unconscious and what is going to give you ultimately fulfillment as well. That also, to bring the scientific side of things into it, what it also does is it activates the executive center part of the brain. Now, for people to understand what is the executive center part of the brain, well, it's positioned in your prefrontal cortex. So just think of it from the point of view, it's just behind your forehead. That's where the executive center part of your brain. The function of the executive center is to get you from A to Z in the fastest, easiest, most least amount of resources possible. That's what its purpose is. Now, what its function does is creativity, innovation, objectivity, and planning. So the more you operate from the executive center part of your brain, all the goals and objectives that you have for your firm and your business, well, now you're bringing that creative element, the innovation element, the planning and the objectivity into it. Now you are getting from A to Z in a much, much faster track process.
I'm worried that half of my audience is going to leave the accounting industry when they realize their purpose isn't here. But no, I'm kidding. All right. So we talked about a lot. We covered a few things. So one of the things that so now I'm kind of following your logic, but then how do I pinpoint then my mission, so to speak? Is this a discussion that I'm going through with you as a consultant that kind of walks me through it? Is there I'm just trying to understand if I wanted to buy into this, right? And I would say, okay, I want to have greater happiness. I want to have more fulfillment. And the pandemic did make me look at life differently. But at the same time, we still need to make a living. We still need to be successful. And you can't just walk away. Some people, perhaps temporarily can, but it's going to affect long-term savings and college funding and, retirement funding. Who knows what it would do? There's a lot of repercussions in just making a decision like this. But how would you then guide a CPA or an accountant, for example, to kind of pinpoint their mission?
Yeah, very simply, and it's so easy. I've been doing this for my whole life. I'm 55 years of age. I've been doing this my whole life. And everything that I've come across and read and researched in relation to finding an individual's life purpose has always never been the right answer. And every single client that comes to me will absolutely agree. Once they have discovered what their life purpose by going through my process, they will absolutely say they've been searching for years, decades, and they haven't been able to get the answers. The methodology that I've developed now over the years, using both the analytical side of myself and the intuitive side to connect with the unconscious. The methodology that I developed is purely going through questions to ask the client, and the questions are specifically designed to find the evidence in a client's life. So therefore, when we find that evidence, every single individual is unconsciously driven to fulfill their life purpose. But we haven't been taught yet. We haven't been taught how to interpret the evidence that our unconscious is constantly giving us. So what I've now done is I've designed a methodology whereby it's asking very, very specific questions. And by asking those specific questions and drilling down into the answers of those questions, now we can get all the information from our unconscious in order to give us what those 4 elements of our life purpose is. So clients, part to answer your question, Lee, clients come to me on a one-to-one basis to work through that process. I've also developed an online course where people can literally go through that course themselves to identify those 4 elements for themselves. And if people want to check it off with me, they can absolutely check it off with me at the end of the course. And what I'm currently right now in the process of is developing an online quiz so that people can actually identify one of those elements, which is your genius role. So literally by completing that online quiz, they'll know specifically what their genius role is, what the strengths are, what the shadow side is of that genius role. So there's multiple ways of how we can find that information.
Can you give an example of a question or two that you would ask, just so I can follow kind of how you're doing this?
Yeah, let's drill into one. So let me put it this way. Let's talk money, because your audience are accountant, so we talk money. If you were to look at all the things and items or elements that you spend your money on, so think of it from the perspective of you take all the money that you earn in a year, and you were to look at what are all the things that you spend your money on. Now, forget about the should tos, have tos, need tos, meaning forget about the mortgages or the loans or the leases or the food, because we've got to eat. So that's a should to, have to, need to. Forget about all of those elements. And now look at what are the things that you're left with that you spent your money on. But also here's the thing. When you come across something that you want to do, or an experience you want to have, or something that you want to attain, and you may not have the money right now or at the time to attain those items or to have those experiences or to do whatever it is that you want to do, you will be unconsciously driven to get those things. So you'll find a way unconsciously, innately, in order to get the money, or find a way in order to actually get those things, have those experiences, or do whatever you want to do. So that's an example of one of those questions where we literally look at what people have spent their money on and the items or the elements or the things that people have bought in some shape or form from that perspective. And then we start to drill down into each one of those and what those things and what those elements represent.
Okay, so is this what gives me happiness then? If I started, we're saying,
yeah,
okay, I'm going to start making my goals, and I'm going to raise. I would always just keep raising the bar. So I would get to goal. I'm goal driven, and I would follow somewhat of what you're saying. And I think subconsciously, 100%, I am driven to whatever these outcomes are. But then my bar keeps going up and up and up, and I'm always chasing what I would call fulfillment or happiness. So how does this kind of all fit together?
So you'll be unconsciously or innately driven to achieve. So can that be one of your genius drivers? Quite possibly it can, but until such time to go through the exercise, we have to identify specifically what is it. So for example, do I see achievement as being one where I'm working with clients? Yeah, absolutely. Not all the time, but there are specific individuals. So for example, if I give you an example of a client, his genius role is the leader, but how achievement comes through as part of his genius drivers is that he wants his team to achieve an outcome. It's not just him on his own. And that's very, very different to an individual wanting to achieve on his own. So does it ultimately give you that happiness and joy for life? Absolutely. What most people do is they go through life not consciously knowing what their unconscious blueprint is. And therefore, they're constantly on this hamster wheel or this vicious circle whereby, say, for example, the example that you give, Lee, whereby they've achieved something, but then they found themselves that they're back to square one and say, okay, now I want to go for the next one. So they're part of it. They have a quest that they are here to fulfill, but then also they've got the genius drivers, which are interlinked. All those four elements that I mentioned, your genius inspiration, your genius drivers, your genius question, your genius role, all of them are interlinked. And when you know all four of them, now you know exactly, for one word, that is your blueprint. And when you work in line with your blueprint, now life becomes an awful lot easier, but you actually achieve far greater success far quicker than not knowing them, obviously.
All right, so I'm going to throw something. So let's say I bought in, and now I have my quest. I'm a leader, and I'm on my way, and I'm trying to get the best out of my team, and I'm hitting goals, and I'm making them. But all of a sudden, a curveball like the pandemic or some political decision completely disrupts my business model, for example.
Yeah.
How does this philosophy? How do I bounce? How do I stay focused and kind of redirect? And when you hit that kind of curveball.
Brilliant question. Absolutely brilliant question. Have you ever noticed, Lee, where there could be stuff going on in the economy or in the environment, and you'll see some business owners where it doesn't matter what happens, they still manage to ride that wave, or not so much avoid the curveballs, but they know how to work with the curveballs in order to actually and still come up tops and be successful. Whereas in the exact same industries, in the exact same economy, you'll get business owners which they flounder, they fall, they go into bankruptcy. One of the primary things is because the business owners that are successful are operating from the executive center part of the brain. Now, if we go back, because this is where the science comes into play, if we were to go back into how literally human beings were developed and go back into cave times, during that period, human beings operated from the executive center part of the brain. They were highly intuitive because they had to be in tune with all their senses in order to sense, was there a tiger or something that was literally going to eat them around the corner? So they were constantly operating from the executive center part of the brain. As evolution, but again, I use evolution as a loose term, as we've moved forward in the decades and the centuries, what has actually happened is the vast majority of people are operating from the monkey part of the brain, which is the amygdala. Now, the amygdala, all it wants is instant gratification. That's all it wants. So it wants the pint of Guinness. We're in Ireland, so we want the pint of Guinness. We want a glass of wine. We want a glass of whiskey, or we want a cake, or we want the donuts, or we want the chocolate. That's what amygdalas want. Okay, so therefore it doesn't know how do we get from A to Z as quickly as possible. So if we go back to the executive center, creativity, planning, objectivity, and innovation. So the people that are most successful when pandemics hit, or when there's a curveball, as you describe it, because when you're operating from the executive center part of your brain, now you know how to react or how to respond and how to change and alter your business and how to pivot.
Yeah, I compare this to people that follow every new hype cycle. Right now, ChatGPT, OpenAI is the big deal, and artificial intelligence and how it's going to take everyone's jobs. And, there's that viewpoint and the fear. And then there's others that go, oh, this is a great tool that I can now do my job faster. How am I going to use this to make, the world better, serve my client?
Yeah.
People from that, I have headlines, it's almost daily of, demographics, and this country's going to not be here, and they're thinking 20, 30, 40 years out, or they're worrying about inflation, and they're worried about things they cannot control, first of all. To me, it just gets you sidetracked. Let's live in the now. Let's deal with the situation and where the opportunities that are in front of us today. How do you advise people to keep their focus on that?
There's a number of different things that I would advise clients to implement into their life. So both their personal life and their business life. So as I said at the top, I've been a business consultant for over 20 years. So while you put the mechanics of the business in place, whereby, what are the mechanics and the systems to get more clients? How do you increase your fees? What are your service offerings? How do you market a business? That's all the foundations and mechanics of business. And you can apply that to literally, it's the same systems for every single business. Growing a business is actually very, very simple, but we make it complicated. But once you put the foundations and the systems in place, Now you can predict the future for that business. All right. So that's on the business side. But from a personal perspective, there are also a few elements that you need to come into play. So one of the practices that, and I don't even have to encourage my clients when my clients ask me in relation to what is it that I do, but one of the practices is meditation. And the reason for is because meditation increases your intuitive side. So think of your intuitive side for our listeners as being that gut feeling that you've had. It's whereby you've had that in what I call inspired thought. Something pops into your mind. You say, actually, do you know what? Maybe I should do X, Y, and Z. And then lo and behold, it works out to be a success. What most people do is they ignore that intuitive side, or they haven't developed it sufficiently in order to read the insights and the information that they get. Your unconscious takes in millions of information per second. The conscious mind only processes a minute, tiny percentage of the information that it gets in. Your unconscious, so if you take from an intuitive perspective, you can be, for one better word, if you were to ask me, can you be clairvoyant, meaning can you see into the future? I don't like using that terminology, but however, your unconscious can pre-warn you all the time. So the more intuitive you are, you're now reading those pre-warning signs. And again, you'll find it from the perspective of when I'm talking to clients, it's that gut feeling. I should send that email, but then lo and behold, they ignore, they don't answer the prompt. And, a couple of days later, they get an aggressive email from their client because they literally, if they had sent the email when they got the inspired thought, it would have preempted that aggressive email coming from my client. So your unconscious is constantly giving you the information in order to know what you're to do. So let's give you a real example of that. When I was before we came into pandemic, and I'm not just saying it for myself because yes, I'm naturally intuitive. Every single individual is intuitive, but can you heighten your intuitive abilities? You absolutely can through a lot of different mechanisms and practices that you can employ. Without knowing the pandemic was coming down through the tracks, I ordered all different equipment to be able to literally, I ordered a 4K camera, I ordered a Yeti microphone, and a whole load of other, let's just call it stuff that you need, okay? I didn't know why I
built a studio.
I built a studio, exactly, that's what I did. But I didn't know ultimately why. I just got to say, look, no, I need to order a microphone, a proper professional studio microphone. Literally 3 months later, the lockdown happened and everything moved online. And what you observe, well, definitely in here in Ireland, what we observed is literally nobody could get cameras or microphones in the first few months of lockdown because literally the demand was so high. That's how your unconscious is constantly guiding you to literally achieve much, much higher levels of success. And one of those practices, which is very easy to implement, apart from increasing your creativity, it massively reduces your stress levels. And that's meditation.
All right. I like that. I'm going to take this a little off of what we've been talking about, but it comes down to, I think accountants normally, this is a stereotype, are risk adverse. They like to do the same way every year. They don't like doing new things. So at this point, they're being disrupted in a bunch of ways. And if I'm following this philosophy, does it help me in my decision-making process? Will it be easier for me to make decisions? And will I perhaps do things that are a little riskier? Meaning we don't know the results. If I do this, there's some risk here and it could pay off incredibly, but accountants usually are a little more conservative. So kind of how does this play into that part of my life?
Yeah, it all depends on the decisions that need to be made. I got one testimonial back from a client, he's based in Australia, and his testimonial actually answers your exact question. And his response was, I'm now able to make I'm able to make decisions much, much quicker and easily as a result of knowing the elements of his, as in those 4 elements. And that testimonial is up on my website. It depends on the question it depends on the decision that needs to be made. If it's a decision about, where do you want to bring the business, or what kind of clients that you want to be working with, or what's the kind of work that you want to be doing and so on. Yes, absolutely gives you from that perspective. if it's decisions in relation to, it could be any aspect, it could be personal life, it could be business life. Can your intuitive element help in making a decision? Absolutely, hands down, without a shadow of a doubt. And every single time that you follow your intuitive side, it will always be the right answer, meaning it will always be the right course. It will always improve situations as opposed to disimproving situations. When you go against your intuitive side, because there have been times over the years where I haven't followed my intuitive and my inspired thoughts, because I may not just don't want to do it, or I ignore it or whatever, but I know when I'm going through it that I've ignored it. And every single one of those has gone against me. I'll give you an example. I was meeting with two individuals at the time, and it was at the time whereby video was becoming, a thing in relation from a marketing perspective. And the investment at the time was €10,000 up front. And what we're going to do is make videos in order to market a business itself. In the meeting, I got an intuitive, let's just call it a gut feeling, said, something's not right here. Get out of here. Just don't go ahead with it. But I was so consciously wanting to do the video marketing because that was the buzz at the time and so on. I committed to paying over the €10,000. I paid over the €10,000. I paid 5,000 further. I have no videos. So that's an example where I went against my intuitive side or my gut feeling side. But that happened. So what you do is you build, for want of a better word, it's a bit like building a muscle. You build in knowing and understanding your intuitive side. So therefore it always guides you in the right way.
I love the intuition building your studio. And as a company, we had started, I don't know if it was intuition, but it wasn't the pandemic. But we were getting smaller and smaller group in the corporate headquarters, and we're becoming a remote company. I mean, we have people all over the country and then now all over the world. And what we decided as a company was to try to find the best people possible, not necessarily the local person. And, can we find ways to collaborate online and still be a successful company and build culture, which we did. And it's obviously it works great. And I think everyone has a better work-life balance. A lot of CEOs right now are coming back and saying, hey, everyone, you got this work-life now change, and they're kind of following your philosophy. But this philosophy doesn't work for me, the corporation, the CEO. So that's why I had asked that question before, is kind of how does this play into real life? Like, to me, there's a little bit of a utopian feeling here. You still have to work. You still have to make money. You still have to do things. So I'm just kind of throwing that to
Absolutely.
you.
But okay, so that's how you deliver your service.
Okay.
But by knowing the elements, it actually multiplies your success in your business and your personal life without a shadow of doubt. I've, one client that comes to mind is his name's JP. He's an accountant. He contacted me a number of years ago, and he's just distraught. He just overwhelmed. His business wasn't doing that great at the time, his accounting practice, and the banks were on his back. He had 3 young kids, married, but he said one sentence during a conversation, and the sentence that he said was, "Paul, I just can't do this anymore. I literally just can't do this anymore." And for that, to me, was a red flag. So I drilled down into a little bit more. And the more I drilled down into it, what I discovered and what I found and what he shared with me was that he had already made a plan to exit. And I mean, exit life. So not just exit his business. It was
big red flag. This is a different red flag. Yeah. Okay.
So I promised I'd worked with him, that I would work with him, which I did. We arranged another meeting. We went through it, and I explained what was actually happening from because I have my own definition when it comes to depression and suicide ideation and so on, which is all partly aligned with what gives you fulfillment and your expression or your purpose and so on. So cut a long story short, I worked with him to identify what his life purpose was. We can do it very, very easily. When I work with clients, I can do it within literally half a day. People complete the course within a day to 2 days. That on average it's 2 days. So we can do it very, very quickly. To cut a long story short, he's now doing 7 figures, still in an accounting practice. But what he had done was we aligned the business to be in line with what is all the elements of his purpose is. 7 figures, extra staff, more time off. Obviously, yeah, he still has the 3 kids. And every now and again, I get either an email or a text message from him with either a photograph or a message just to say whatever I told him previously had actually transpired. The last one I got, he was in Hawaii with his family, and he was just absolutely living life and loving life. So that's, you don't necessarily have to, from the outside world, it's like as if nothing has changed. But from the inside world, inside the business, everything has changed. That's the difference.
Yeah, and I can appreciate that. I think a lot of times what people feel is they're so overwhelmed with so many decisions that they actually don't finish anything, and they get into a path where they're not successful. So are you saying a lot of times when you through this exercise that, in all firms, they have about 50 employees, partners now, they're very successful, but the main CPAs that run the firm, their purpose is the business development side. They have everyone else doing the work, and they enjoy that part. They're good at it. And, and they're one of the more successful firms that I know of. And they definitely took this, they didn't try to do everything. So the whole idea of that person who is doing everything and just losing their mind and can't concentrate, I think that's kind of where your last example, kind of what they realize. Is that a fair read?
Will be of that particular example. However, you get other examples whereby when you bring all the partners together and the senior management staff, and you align everybody's genius drivers and the overall purpose of the business and the firm, when you bring all that together, now you can imagine the multiplier effect.
Yeah. So if one staff member is very good at, let's just say auditing and financial statements, and they're going there, and then partner A is the breadwinner who's bringing in the client facing, and this helps. You're saying if you can identify that and go through this process as a firm. So if I was working with you and a CPA firm came to me, would you then, is that part of the onboarding, the intake, where you're asking these questions to kind of develop that? And then is the takeaway to the firm kind of a roadmap, so to speak, a playbook, how they can now take this into their practice?
Yeah, it's ultimately down to what the client wants. It's as simple as that. So I would have some individuals or some partners within the firm whereby they will want to work with me on a one-to-one basis, completely private, confidential. Nobody else knows about it. I have so many NDAs signed, non-disclosure agreements signed, it's unbelievable. So they will work with me on a one-to-one basis. But if the client's having gone through it themselves on a one-to-one basis, or there's been situations or organizations and departments, as in government departments or large companies, whereby they know what I do, they brought me in literally to take it team by team by team right through the whole firm or through the whole business, doing exactly the same process. And then we for the senior management team, what we do is we bring it all together, and then we make everything aligned within the business itself. Yeah,
because I think the reality is most accountants by trade in training, they're not taught how to run a business. They're not taught how to run their practice and set everything up. And they don't think things through. And a lot of times they become what I call a generalist, where they end up with, let's just say 100 clients, and none of them are in the same niche or vertical. And that is what makes it so stressful to be in this business. If they did maybe step back and say, hey, I really like working with restaurant owners, and I'm really good at this part, and I want to that's my passion. Those are the people I want to help. I agree with you 100%. We have found the best outcomes for practices that do kind of realign themselves versus what I'm going to call the traditional method of building their firms. And then, it's referral based, which is great, but every referral, if you're in a vertical, each referral is in the same vertical. If you have 100 different clients, each new client comes in, you're going to have to learn what makes them tick. If it's a business owner, what are their KPIs that are important, things like that. So I think this has been very fascinating. I'm hopefully I might even take a quiz or two of yours and check it out and see how it works. But if someone wanted to work with you or get some coaching, or perhaps some sort of extra kind of a game plan and find their own purpose, how do they contact you? How do they work with you?
Yeah, and I suppose there's two ways. One is I've two different websites. So if it's purely from a personal perspective, it's paulwilliamdavis.com. My other website, which is davisbusinessconsultants.com, that's purely around business growth, how to get more clients, more fees, more time. The two of them are interlinked anyway. But probably the website is the easiest, to be honest with you, Lee. paulwilliamdaves.com or davesbusinessconsultants.com.
Yeah, we'll put that in the description and obviously the material. But I appreciate you spending some time with us today. I think our audience can actually perhaps maybe take a deep breath and just say, hey, I can get control of my life again. I can get control of my practice. What I see, the health issues from the stress and not getting enough physical activity and not enough emotional. I mean, it's a really trying industry. And I see a lot of people burning out right now. And I think maybe a lot of people could really step back and kind of look at their lives. And this is a perfect time to do it and get on track for the future and not be stressed out. So I think a lot of what you've talked about really resonates with our audience. So hopefully they will reach out to you. Is there anything I missed that you wanted to add to kind of close this up?
It's just on that particular comment where accountants are stressed and overwhelmed. Look, I've been talking about this for literally decades. Accountants can take a very, very serious look at their business and move towards more value-added services within their business. They are absolutely primely positioned to do that for clients. And not only that, but it's what clients want. So the second book that I published was How to Get More Clients, More Fees, More Time. It literally is the blueprint for it. So when I work with an accountant, but it's not so much that. I'm just saying, look, if there's accountants out there that are stressed or overwhelmed in relation to try and get all the work done, imagine being able to get to a position whereby you're absolutely right, Lee, in terms of identify your niche and work within your niche. It's the biggest fear for accountants. It really is, because they want to deal with every single client. But when you identify your niche, but imagine getting to a position whereby you've got less clients, but you're earning more income. Which would you prefer? Because again, it gets back to the old adage, turnover for vanity and profit for sanity. So look, it's both sides. It's the personal side and the business side. You got to get both working right.
So I don't know if Paul is not writing our marketing material or our talking points, but obviously people that work with CountingWorksPRO.com, our current clients know that we're big into doing the value added. How do you take a tax prep client to become a tax planning client? And, I've done all the math. We've done other podcasts and webinars about this, and it's even better, like virtual CFO. So, even with new technology and automation and things that are automating a lot of tasks that you used to do, what I call mundane tasks, I think the big opportunity for the tax and accounting space is 100% focusing on these value addeds. And more importantly, there's going to get more value from your client's point of view too. And Paul just mentioned it, your clients want this. They want transparency. They want you to be able to provide them much more guidance than just what I call a commodity-like service. So definitely, and then check out the book, obviously. I think that would be really valuable for our audience. I appreciate your time. And as an Irish person myself, I understood the Guinness part. So unfortunately, maybe too much of my time is spent on that side, but I do appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and thanks for spending your time with us today.
Thanks so much, Lee. Thank you.